above all, like the thing that runs through everything that you do is this idea of encouraging women to carve out time, to engage in reading, to find pleasure in the pages, and to make time to even talk about books. And I just want, I want to know if you want to talk a little bit about that, that origin stories or how you put all these things together, and then we can go from there.
Well, I've been a huge reader my whole life. I love to read. I feel like books have been sort of the flashlight leading me through life. And I have always been really passionate about sharing great books and great articles. And I get really excited about everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to read this or you have to do this. And I ended up starting this podcast kind of on a whim. Moms don't have time to read books. And it's all grown from there. I didn't know how much I would just completely love interviewing authors. I thought so. I mean, I started writing authors like fan letters when I was a kid, and then ended up at the plaza having tea with this author who I'd been a pen pal with for many years. Anyway, when I was 12 or something. So I have like a long history of this, but I just love doing what I'm doing. And then now that I've gotten to know all the authors so well and the industry more, it's led me to all these other channels and doing all these other things that have just become natural outgrowths, basically, of my love of reading and my enthusiasm.
As we get to Mother's Day, I heard you might have a few great suggestions for, book ideas for gifts for Mother's Day. So, because we were talking yesterday about our whole idea, one of our Mother's Day's hacks is that maybe we should all just say what we want, and then we won't be disappointed. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a win-win if we tell our family, hey, I really want this, and they can get it for us. So if you can kind of, help us along with that.
Books for Mother's Day. I'm looking on the floor because there were literally 12 books that came out today that I've read recently, and they're so good. First one, which I'll recommend, is called Let's Talk About Hard Things by Anna Sale, who's the host of the podcast Death, Sex, and Money. And this is great because she does touch a lot on grief and also how to support other people through grief, but also how to talk about like tricky things like finances. And, there's just so much in a lot of her personal memoir-ish things, but she interviewed tons and tons of people for it. So I really enjoyed that. And, it has a flower. So there you go. You're sending your mom flowers. Let's see. What else can I recommend that's on the floor? This is really good. Sorry, I should have had these on my desk. Ruby Falls by Deborah Goodrich Royce. This is like a Hollywood glamour, almost mystery with mental anguish, and it's immersive, and it's a kind of read that your mom will read or your friend or whatever and not want to stop reading it until they figure out like what's going on. It's and she's a great writer, so that's good. And then if you want a range of things, this book just came out, The Penguin Book of the Modern American Short Story, edited by John Freeman. So for anyone who enjoys short stories or who doesn't perhaps have the attention span for a full novel, that's another one. And then here, I'll give one more recommendation, When the Stars Go Dark by Paula McLean.
Yeah,
so good.
Cleveland, so she's a local girl. So
okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another book that I think might be a good read.
Yes, I'll recommend my own book.
Let's go. A little, humble bragging is always in order, right?
Humble brag. Moms Don't Have Time To, a quarantine anthology. This is my anthology, but it's with 60 essays, more than 60 essays by authors who have been on my podcast. And they're really, really good essays. I have to say, I really want people to read, not because I edited it, but they're beautiful essays, and they're on 5 topics that moms don't have time to do: eat, breathe, have sex, work out, and should I say breathe? What am I forgetting? How can I've done so many discussions about that. Read, have sex, work out, eat, and breathe. And the essays are very relatable, and they're literary in nature and beautiful. So I would recommend this because
I have to say I actually had a chance to read a few, and not to put you on the spot, but you're one, The Weight of It All. I think it was just I think it's, and do you mind if I briefly summarize it? It was just
yes,
kind of how some weight battles and thinking about it, and how we do focus on our body image, and then being in the pandemic, and how you with your kids. It was really I just thought that I could, I just got in there with you and I could be there. So it was really great. So
Thank you. Thank you.
In terms of reading specifically, like what do you say to people? Because you've said that this is, for you, and I think some of us are just trying to carve out play, especially for moms, to find these things. Like, what are some of the advice that you'd give for, the rest of us who are like, we're just trying to find 10 minutes to read? And I'm sitting here, I honored you today. I brought my book with me to my desk so that if I had a few spare minutes, I could read. But, what is your advice for that?
I think just fit it in at different parts of the day. This is at least what's worked for me, but I don't know if this works for everybody. But there are points in the day where I'm like, okay, this is when I do this, right? Like similar to like I've made it, I guess, more or less into a habit, right? This is when, okay, here are times of the day that I read. I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate today. I like to, every so often, a couple times a week, I go down to the gym in my building on the elliptical machine and I read the whole time, and I hold the book in front of me. So I'm kind of like working my core and reading at the same time and doing the elliptical. So I do that for like 45 minutes a couple times a week. And that's a lot of reading that adds up. I always read while I'm waiting for the kids to fall asleep, the little kids. I have 4 kids. So the little guys take a while and they like me nearby and blah, 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 like in and out. So whenever I start bedtime, I bring my book, I read a book to them, and then they know, like, what are you reading? And we talk about my book, and, I'm hoping that it like eventually like inspires this love of reading, but who knows? And at the least it like involves them in what I'm doing. Cause then I can say, guess who I interviewed today? It's, the woman who wrote that dragon book you liked or something. Right. I also try to do some books that they like, so they think it's cool. So I read while they fall asleep. I read before I fall asleep every night. And I listen to audiobooks while I walk my dog. Or if I drop my daughter at school and I walk home, I'll listen to an audiobook on the way. If I have a long drive, although audiobooks are slower for me than regular books, because I read so quickly and I can't like listen very quickly. And some books I read at my desk, right? Books that I have to prepare. I just sit at my desk and I read them and I underline and I turn the pages over when there's something interesting. And I read a lot in the mornings. Sometimes I let the kids go on their iPads. And so,
I'm talked to about and you talked already about how your books kind of intersect, with your parenting and how you're trying to instill, as we leave the read aloud, like when you're reading to your kids and you're reading with them, do you have any other thoughts, because we have a lot of, our kids with teens is what we really focus on, but, how do we foster older kids, love of reading or even reading, especially because there are so many distractions now?
I mean, I have twins who are almost 14, so I understand this challenge and this demographic very, very well. One thing is not to judge what they're reading. So they don't have to read literary fiction or anything. Like my son loves to read graphic novels and I'm like, great, read a graphic novel. My daughter prefers to read, J14 magazine, but I'm like, whatever, read it, like read a magazine, read whatever you're interested in. If it's reading, it helps. I mean, my little guys the other day were like, they were reading on their iPads. Like, they're like, what does this spell? And it was, I'm like, you're like, should I allow this in preferences? And I was like, at least they're reading,
Right.
But yes, I mean, fostering reading in teens is tough. I was like, why don't you listen to audiobooks? He goes to boarding school. I'm like, do this in your spare time. But, he wants to play video games. So
yeah, I
don't know. I keep sending him books and, when he's here being like, what about this one? And I take them to bookstores all the time. Like on the weekends, that'll be our adventure. We'll like get the car out and go to Brooklyn and check out Bookstore Magic or, so I keep them around books a lot. But I try not to pressure them. I feel like anything I pressure them to do, they don't want to do. So it's such a tricky,
right. You don't want it to backfire, but you also want to make them model it and see it. It's funny because I used to, when my kids were younger, I would go to the library and I would bring home stacks of books and I would just put them by their beds and, just think that something would stick. And sometimes and again, so.
Well, I think letting them pick, I tried that did not work for us, but I've taken them to libraries and I used to go to Barnes and Noble with them on our way home from school and let them roam around. And, that was one of the only things that didn't count as a gift. I used to be super strict. Like you only get gifts on, on your birthday or the holidays. And I've gotten so bad and so lax in my guilt over working so much, I think. But anyway, but books didn't count. You could always get a book if you wanted a book within reason. So that I tried to do that. But I think kids are really into podcasts. I think trying to get them to listen to more podcasts about books, like not mine necessarily, but books targeted for them. And I think it's more getting these, book fluencer teens, getting on the bandwagon and, recommending more books, Bookstagram for teens, all of that would be more helpful, I think, than being in a book club with mom.
Yeah.